it a second and then we should get a little.
Okay.
Now. Okay.
Are we good to go, team?
We are good to go. We are good to go. Good morning, everybody.
Hi, yeah, welcome. A few introductions before we get cracking, just while we're waiting for people to join us. My name's Simon Perlman, and I've been working in the ELT forever, it feels like. Started in 1997, so I've been at it for a while. Now happily based in active language here in Cadiz.
And I am T, or Teresa Bestwick. I also work at Active Language in Cadiz, and I'm a freelancer, and so I do some bits of training, and also not my free time, but I also do some writing, materials design, and general just enjoyment of professional development in the profession. Okay, so we're here today with our first webinar, TEFL in the time of COVID. So I'll hand over to Simon. Please do feel free to let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. We'll be keeping an eye on it and we'll try to reply to the messages. There will be time for you to share your thoughts and experiences later and ask any questions that you might have. Okay, Simon.
Thank you, Fabs, T, thanks very much. People who know me know I'm not brilliant at multitasking, so I'm trying to keep an eye on the Facebook feed at the same time. We'll see how we go with that. So welcome, first of all, welcome to everybody, wherever you may be. Do say hi in the chat. I can see people joining us now, which is fab. Say hi, say where you're from. That'll get the ball rolling nicely. So welcome to TEFL in the time of COVID, brought to you by us at Active Language. The format is basically that I'll be asking T some questions and she'll take us through things. I'll be asking her mainly about ideas for the classroom, about teaching behind a mask, so in socially distanced classrooms. Hopefully, where everybody should be respecting the minimum distances involved, of course. For those of us who are teaching 100% online, we'll have ideas around that as well, and into the all-new world of hybrid teaching as well. The idea in hybrid teaching, for those of you who don't know, is that half of the students are in the room and the other half are at home on Zoom. And there's the interesting interaction between these different things. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new set of challenges and opportunities, we like to think. A bit of context, of course. Here we are in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and COVID equals change. That's one thing we all know. And change, yeah, of course, it gives us opportunities, but it also represents some big challenges for us all. Lots of people are in precarious situations around the world, wherever you may be, and some of us are able to carry on teaching, which is fabulous. We have students to teach, jobs to do, and livings to earn. One thing's for sure, we're navigating uncharted waters. It's new for all of us. We're here in Cadiz, in the south of Spain, almost as far south as you go before you hit Africa. So the seafaring metaphor feels sort of appropriate for us. Are we all in the same boat? Yes and no. There's certainly differences of opportunity depending on where we are and how we're working, but also differences of approach. Even in the same town, from school to school, there's different ways that people are approaching these things and solving their teaching puzzles. There's no rights or wrongs. Well, probably are actually, but we're all learning, I think, is the important thing to say. It feels like every day, almost every week, governments change tack, things change, and we're adjusting to change. Going with the changes of the wind, a lull followed by an unexpected storm. They'll continue with these metaphors for a while longer. But we reset again and again. I think it's also really important to think that we're not alone. It can feel like we are, but it's happening for all of us, and we can be in it together. I certainly believe that we can handle more when we feel connected. So, are we all in the same boat? No, I don't think we're all in the same boat, but perhaps we're all in the same storm. This webinar and what follows, we'll try to navigate a safer passage through the stormy seas. For the rest of the webinar, T will take us through some ideas. There'll be opportunities for a question and answer. Remember, we'll be looking at the 3 areas: behind a mask in the socially distanced classroom, teaching hybrid, and 100% online. Please put your chat in, your questions or thoughts or ideas in the chat as we move along. As I said, none of us are experts in this. It's all new for all of us. So I think together we can make a difference. Oh, and importantly, right at the end of the webinar, I'll be introducing something quite special, and there'll be a special offer for you as a little thank you for coming. So, T, where would you like to start?
Well, I figured I'd kind of start with the one that I'm least familiar with, which is hybrid teaching. And I kind of wanted to start by introducing what I see as 2 different types of hybrid teaching. So there's kind of pure hybrid teaching, which is it's set up, it's organized for some students to be in the classroom, some students to be at home. There's a rota system of who's where and when, and it's all very fixed. The teacher knows what's happening and who to expect when and where. And then there's also what a lot of schools have been faced with, which is kind of a window on the classroom or a Zoom window. So because of students having to self-isolate, perhaps because of cases within their friendship group, within their classes at school, we're quite often finding that students are staying at home and joining a week or 2 weeks worth of classes just sporadically. So it's not something that's set in stone, that's kind of set up from the beginning of term and happening as a regular thing. But 1 week you might have 3 students who are joining from home, another week you might have 6, another week you might have 8. So I wanted to kind of introduce 3 ideas, which I think could work both in this pure hybrid classroom and also in this spontaneous hybrid classroom, let's call it. So one of the things that teachers have been mentioning is kind of in this, particularly in the pure hybrid classroom, managing the interaction. So trying to ensure that they are dealing both with the students in the physical classroom and the students in the Zoom classroom equally. Because I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of focusing on one group more than others. Probably focusing more on the students who are with you in the classroom, because that's what most of us are used to in our teaching. So one way you can manage the interaction between these 2 different groups is to set up a buddy system. So this would be effective for teens and up who are able to bring their own devices to class. And so then what you can do is you can have the students who are in the class in the Zoom meeting as well as part of the online classroom. And then when you do activities in pairs, rather than pairing up the students who are in the classroom and the students who are working online as kind of 2 separate entities, you have this buddy system where somebody who's in the physical classroom and somebody who's in the online classroom are working together. That helps to maintain that interaction. Another way that you can do it if students are bringing their own devices is to get them using other types of social media to interact, for example, using WhatsApp, if they have that. Do check what your school policy is but if you're allowed to encourage the students to be using WhatsApp, if it's okay for them to exchange numbers and so on. But I've heard good things about this buddy system. I've heard it works particularly well with adults. Not heard so much from teens teachers, but it's certainly an option to help you manage that interaction.
Great, thanks, T. I think it'd be really interesting for people in the chat to say how they've experimented with some of these things as well, the things that have worked, the problems that people have had. Yeah, great, thanks.
I mean, absolutely. I think we're all very familiar with the physical classroom, not so much perhaps the socially distanced classroom. We're all very familiar now with working online because of having done it in the first lockdown. But this new hybrid way of teaching is very new to many of us. To be honest, what I've read is that hybrid is not the way to go. It's kind of the worst of both worlds. So it would be really interesting to hear from any teachers who are doing it, whether it's successful or what challenges you're having from it as well.
Unusual for you to be so negative about things.
I know.
I think, speaking from a different perspective, perhaps, I think for some schools, it's really the only way they can feasibly keep numbers down in the rooms and teach and have the same number of students coming to classes. Of course, at the end of the day, it's a business, and lots of school owners are struggling with these puzzles and thinking about the best way of doing it. So yeah, teaching hybrid for sure has its challenges, for sure. But for some people, it's absolutely the best way forward. Certainly, I would argue, better than people cramming rooms full of students like we were before COVID, inappropriately in many cases. So I think, yeah, it is tricky, it is a challenge, and it is here to stay, at least for a while. So yeah, great, good luck.
Another thing, talking to teachers, both, well, thinking about these teachers who are doing these Zoom window classrooms is ways that they can personalize monitoring. When we're in the physical classroom, we're very used to monitoring our students whilst they're doing an activity. Obviously now we're doing it from more of a distance, but we're still able to do that. We're still able to have that one-to-one time with the students. And I think one of the dangers of teaching with an online class is you've got all the students on the screen in front of you, and it makes it much more difficult to focus on that one student. So one way around this is to make use of individual breakout rooms. Kind of sounds a bit mean to send every student into their own little room to work, but it's actually a really good way for you to be able to go in, talk to that student on a one-to-one basis, both about the work that they're doing, but also just as an opportunity to check in. You know, how are you doing? How's school? What are you getting up to at the weekends? And things like that, so that you can still build rapport with your students.
I think that's a really interesting one, that idea. So students effectively are in their own breakout room, in their own bubble. Yeah.
Not for the whole lesson.
Sorry?
Not for the whole lesson, just for...
Okay. So just for moments of it, which allow you then to move around. Lisa has commented on issues on the issue of the buddy system. And she's experimented with buddies, but she mentions that there can be problems with Wi-Fi and students' data, and that's on bandwidth and all those sorts of issues. Yeah, of course. If we're in a school and there's 10 classes going on or 5 classes going on, that's a lot of bandwidth. So yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that, Lisa. Okay, yeah, I was thinking as well about hybrid teaching and thinking that really the thing to do is to try and take the pressure off ourselves a little bit, to acknowledge its imperfections, to think, yeah, we can't do everything, but actually to do the best that we can. And if I was going to give maybe one key tip, it would be, as a sort of general idea, to try to find moments to interact with each person equally. One way, and it's so difficult, I think we're drawn into into teaching the people who are in front of us and forgetting perhaps the people who are on the screen. So perhaps one way of doing that, to that idea, keeping that idea in the forefront of our minds, but perhaps also thinking about how to keep a check of it. Oh, have I spoken to T? Have I spoken to Daniel? Have I spoken to Anna or Sonia or Danielle or Lottie? Just looking at the names there on the chat at the moment. So just keep an eye on these things, to check in with people, to help people to feel connected and make sure we're spreading ourselves well. Great, thank you, T.
No, I mean, just adding to that, I remember during one of the previous webinars that we did, I kind of mentioned when we're all teaching online of having like a checklist next to you, because when you're in the physical classroom, it's much easier to keep a track of who you've spoken to, who's answered a question, not because you necessarily go around in order, but people aren't moving. I don't know, it makes the interaction much easier. So yeah, do go back to having that kind of slip of paper that you're carrying around with the names of all your students. Just make sure that you are nominating people in feedback, monitoring, checking in, doing all those things we would normally be doing.
Yeah, I think especially this is true when people have got their camera turned off, which a lot of our students do. Yeah, it's so easy to forget about them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great.
And one more idea about actually making your life easier is to make use of the students. So when you're in this hybrid classroom or this Zoom window, do get the students involved. I think it's worthwhile to have a class scribe who is responsible for putting everything in the chat. So obviously you're going to be doing your normal teacher things, and you might just turn around suddenly and write a word on the board for the class. And it can then be the class scribe's responsibility to put that into the chat, rather than you then having to remember to do that yourself. And I think as well, another role could be a class spokesperson. Obviously, when you're teaching in this hybrid classroom, you're going to have to be very aware of where you're standing. If you don't have a voice amplifier, if you don't have a mic attached to your Zoom, you'll need to make sure that you're always within hearing range for the students. And then obviously you're going to be nominating the students who are in the physical classroom, and they might not be close to the mic. So having a class spokesperson who's able to repeat things, who's sitting closer to the laptop, the computer, to their own device, and is able to kind of take responsibility for repeating students' answers if the students in the Zoom classroom aren't able to hear.
Yeah, I really love that idea. For me, that idea as well about taking the pressure off ourselves. You know, we're trying to interact with people on the screen, we're trying to interact with people in the classroom. And actually, the class scribe, or the sort of go-between between us, between the teacher and the students in the room, I think it's a fabulous idea. Yeah, let's make our lives as easy as possible. And it reminds me of our normal classes, when we had our class slaves, no, wrong word, when we had our class, what's the better word for that? Helper, that's the one.
Yeah, helpers.
Our class helpers there, and they did a lot of the work for us. Let's think about that as well in these online classrooms, and it's I think a great way for teens to get involved. Yeah, it could be good, brilliant. Shall we move on, T?
Yeah, let's go on to pure online teaching.
Great.
It would be interesting as well to know if any of you out there are only doing online teaching. Maybe it's a decision that your academies took to just avoid the whole issue of socially distanced classrooms, or these problems around students isolating, and just went purely online from the start. Leading on from this idea about personalizing the moments that you have with your students, it's still important in the online lessons to make sure that you've got this one-to-one opportunity. I think you can still make use of individual breakout rooms, but also when all of your students are online, it's much easier to make use of the individual chats. Again, just sending them a little private message to check in, say, ask how they're doing, send me an emoji or something like that. We still need to remember that our students are human beings, and we need to be building our rapport with them. For some teachers, that's actually easier in an online environment. They're finding, having everyone in the same physical environment, in this same screen, is really helping them. Whereas I think some teachers are struggling that they don't have this face-to-face interaction in a physical environment anymore. Another idea for the online classroom, and I think perhaps this one is not necessarily it's a problem, but ways of keeping students engaged. So when we're in the physical classroom, obviously they can come in, we can have different posters on the wall, we can have the chairs set up in a different way, perhaps pre-COVID. There were lots of different ways that we could change the environment for us, for our learners, to kind of keep it new and keep it interesting. And so one thing that your students and you can do is make use of your virtual background. So different ideas for this. It could be that you as the teacher change your background as an introduction to the topic. It doesn't have to be a place. It could be an animal. It could be anything you want, really. Another way of doing it could be that all the students change their backgrounds to, for example, a place they want to go to, a place they've been, or it could be as well that you choose a local place. And then you can ask the students, do you live near here? How often do you go? What do you do there? Who do you go with? And it's just another way of building into the routine and keeping them interested so that they're not always seeing the same backdrop when they come into the class.
Yeah, that's really nice. I really like as well with our, just thinking about it from a sort of normal day-to-day type thing. It could be part of the routines as well. With our slightly older, younger learners, perhaps, describing where they are, people asking and answering questions about it, that kind of thing. When we get into our B1 students as well, that good old chestnut of those Cambridge exams where we have to, or maybe I shouldn't say Cambridge, just said it again, oops, exam boards where they have to describe a photograph, for example. And it'd be a really nice way of doing it, just a minute each, nice way of encouraging students to speak, and then there could be questions and answers afterwards. So for kids, older kids perhaps, for teenagers, even to adults as well, it could be a really great way to get things going. And I think as well, the idea there of encouraging natural interactions, it's not sort of teacher-student related, but trying to get those more natural interactions happening, even though it's always going to be it's going to be different online, of course, as we all know, that turn taking and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And this idea of turn taking actually leads into my next point, which is the issue of lag. Oh, that was a nice little segue there, wasn't it? So this issue of the minute that you have more than 3 people in a meeting, in a Zoom online classroom, nothing happens simultaneously. I have a family chat with my mum and my sisters every week, and there's always a moment where somebody freezes, and then a millisecond later, the rest of their sentence comes out. And so I think this is something to bear in mind when we're trying to build in some of the things that we always used to do in the physical classroom. And one of those is drilling. I think drilling with lag is horrible. If you've ever been in one of those situations where you've got an echo when you're on the phone and you say something and half a second later you hear yourself saying it again. And I think that's a similar problem with drilling when you've got this lag. So great opportunity to make the most of your mute button. It's great because the students can still all be mouthing the words. You can actually still monitor them quite easily when they're drilling just by watching their mouths move. So it's relatively easy to see a lot of the sounds that they should be making and whether they're making them correctly, even if you can't hear what they're saying.
Because you can see their mouths moving in a certain way.
Yeah, as long as they've got their cameras on, you can still see if they're saying all the words and if they're saying e instead of I. Obviously, it's not perfect, but you still can do a lot with drilling on mute. And I think as well that this is quite a good thing for our shyer students, or those less confident ones. You know, when we're in the physical classroom and we're getting everyone to say it together, that's great because you're kind of lost in this bubble. You can hear yourself, but you're not the only voice that's being heard. Whereas if you do have this lag, and then most of the class have finished the sentence and then this one little voice comes in at the end, that can be quite off-putting for the student, if you know, if they're not so confident with their pronunciation skills. Yep.
Yeah, nice, great, great. Okay, fabulous. Anything else you want to say on the online classroom?
Not for the moment. I'm sure I'll come up with some more ideas in the future.
Yeah.
But today I kind of went with 333. Is it good? The magic number. So that's what we've gone for.
So they say. Fantastic. Great. A couple of things that just occurred to me. Again, it's about acceptance, I think, that it's not going to be the same as the physical classroom. And we need to accept and embrace those differences. I was observing an online class just yesterday and noticed how the teacher just allowed space and time for things to happen, not to be too worried about pushing on in there, which I thought was great. And the other thing I liked was that this teacher really allowed time to check in with the students. Hey, Mario, are you okay over there? So checking in with students on a sort of personal level, but also on a tech level. Can you see this on the screen? I thought that was really helpful as well, just to make sure that students are there and with it, and accepting the fact that that will slow things down. But again, with my interaction with students and parents, people can feel like they're forgotten in an online classroom. So do make sure, again, it comes back again to that questions of rapport and interaction, just making sure that you're mentioning that. Harry mentioned in the chat earlier, thank you, Harry, about the checklist, and it allows us to monitor very thoroughly. Perhaps we're in the hurly-burly of the physical classroom, we forget some of these things. Great. Just catching up on a few bits and bobs from the chat, if I may, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fiona talked about using the one-to-one breakout rooms as well for tutorials and keeping students busy. They might be doing an exam, something lengthy, and having that moment, or trying to find moments when we can just engage with people one-to-one. So that's great. Alex made a good point about sharing equipment. We can't have students, or we don't want to encourage students to be tapping away on our keyboards and doing those things. I think that's a great point, and we need to be totally aware of these things. One idea that came to me was that it's probably okay if students are doing their hands first. If you've got gel in the classroom, and if I mean, we don't want students to be doing it all the time. I know my hands get terribly dry; they're shot to pieces. Oh, I tell you. But I thought it was a good point. And maybe by having a little bit of gel there, then it could solve that problem. Dan mentioned about having cameras on, and about an article that he'd read, I think. Sorry, it's disappeared out the chat. But the idea that about forcing students to turn their cameras on. We all know as teachers that it's much nicer experience for everybody when their cameras are on, but also to tread carefully in those areas. There may be some very good reasons why students have their cameras off. And personally, I like to think of it as a moment to engage with the families as well. So is there any reason why Enrique's always got his camera off? It's better if you can, but yeah, there may be all sorts of reasons. So do tread carefully with those things. Lottie commented on the buddy system and saying that she's not quite sure how it works. With all of these things, there will be follow-up available. That sort of question when we want to clarify some stuff, then Lottie, please do come back to us with that. There'll be a nice way to do it later, which I'll tell you about. And yeah, sometimes the devil's in the detail. So the ideas are great, but if you don't understand the detail, you can all go a bit wrong. Great.
Cool. Should I carry on with the last little bits?
Sorry, yeah, please.
That's all right. No, it's great. It's nice having some company. Normally when I do this, I'm just staring at the screen on my own. So Simon mentioned before about not getting the students to be sharing and touching different things, which is absolutely true. So that's why if they can bring their own devices to class, that can solve a lot of the issues. And I think another thing that teachers have noticed going into the socially distanced classroom this year is ways of minimizing paper. Obviously, it's great for the environment, but also we want to try, well, we definitely don't want activities where we have one piece of paper and then we pass it to the next person and it goes around, and by the end of the lesson, you've touched 20 different pieces of paper. And I think teachers are finding lots of tech alternatives for the activities that they always used to do that had paper. And now they're looking for ways of doing it without paper. And there was a really good tech tool called Triptycho, which I think some people are familiar with. It ran on Flash. And as many of you will know, Flash is dying a death at the end of this year. So the creator of Triptycho has rejigged it. He's created a whole new Triptycho, which is not Flash reliant. However, I think that it's now a subscription only service. Still worth checking out. It's not particularly expensive, I don't think. And it does have lots of good resources. One of the resources which I always used to really like from Triptycho was their word wheel. So this was good if you were doing those activities where students had to talk for a minute about something. They had to choose a topic at random from a set of cards that you had, and then talk to their partner for a minute. One of the ways that we always used to do it was not using filler words like or another way of doing it was giving their partner a list of key vocabulary, key phrases, key functional language to look out for depending on the topic. And so I was trying to find a free alternative to this word wheel. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly with you now, because there's one called tools-unite.com, and they have this word wheel that you can create. And the good thing about it as well, when you edit the wheel here and put in the topics that you want to talk about, you can then send this word wheel to your students. So then if they do have their own devices, they can spin it themselves. Or if you're doing it as a whole class activity, you can spin it from the front, and all the students A have to talk about Black Friday or whatever comes up. And word spinners as well are quite a good way of randomizing for nominating. If you're looking for ways to kind of keep your students on their toes, it's a good way that you can kind of spin the wheel when it's time for feedback, and randomly nominate a student. One thing I would say against doing that is that we all know that there are some students who we want to nominate for certain things and some students we want to nominate for other things. Perhaps we want to nominate our weaker students with earlier questions because they're more likely to have finished those, and then perhaps the faster finishers will be nominating them for questions 8, 9 and 10. So obviously that's one negative of using this word wheel, that it does randomize it and you might end up nominating someone that you didn't want to. But there's that one for you, tools-unite.com. I'll put it in the chat afterwards.
I think that does, sorry, I was just going to say that I think one of the great things about, there's lots of chat going on, there's some really lovely interaction going on there. So if people have got favourite tech tools they like using, then feel free to pop it on there. T and I will try and work through them all afterwards to make them usable in a different space, but feel free to share favourite tech tools in the chat. It's great to see so much chat going on.
Absolutely. And I think although in the first lockdown, a lot of companies were offering their tech for free, obviously now that's been removed. So if you've found something that you used a lot in the first lockdown is no longer free to use and you found an alternative, do let everyone know. although you never know, then 3 months later, that one will be a subscription only, but never mind. If it's worth it, it's worth it. Another thing, hang on, I dropped my notes. Another thing about this socially distanced classroom is energy levels. A lot of teachers felt at the beginning of the year, a lot of their classes seemed to be quite down. And I think that's probably partly just because the students were all adapting to this new environment, both in our 3 hours a week in their language classes, but also in their own schooling. You know, maybe for 6 hours a day, they were sitting in the same spot and not interacting as much as they used to. In the playground, everything's different as well. Interestingly, chatting to Carmen, one of our teachers, she said that with her very young learners, the personality types almost became much more noticeable with this socially distanced classroom. So whereas before, you know, you had some students who were a bit more energetic, some students who were quieter, now it was much more obvious who were the students who were happy just to sit and get on with things, and who were those students who really needed to be up and using energy and moving. And so I think one thing that it's important to do is to stop doing this reactively and start building it into our lessons. So, you know, after an activity, have a little brain break, get students up, get them stretching, have them balance a pencil on their head and turn left and turn right. They don't need to be up and running around the classroom. They can stand up, they can stand behind their chairs, still in their own little space, but just give them the opportunity to move a little bit. For us as well, when we're working online, we know how tough it is to sit for a few hours. So look for opportunities for yourself as well, if you're teaching online, to introduce these little brain breaks into the classroom. And one final thing.
Yeah. Sorry, I really like that idea about the brain break. Sorry to interrupt you.
Right.
And just for me, I'm not sure about the expression brain break. I know exactly what you're trying to say with that. For me, it would be more like a movement break. You talked about it in the very young learners classroom, which I think is a really obvious, a great place for it to be, a really important place for us to think about it. But actually, with everybody, I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old daughter, and I know how actually they do need to move. They do need to get out. They should be doing it at school. Yes, of course they should. And if we can do it a little bit in our classes, I mean, it'd be interesting to know what people's thoughts are on that as well. But I would say, you know, in an hour-long class, maybe a couple of good stretches, good movements, and just to take away from that. Another way to think about doing these things is our good old friend, a very different way of doing it, which isn't a physical movement, it is more of a mental brain break. Could be our old friend, the guided meditation, guided visualization, where people can have a break and they can operate in a different way. They can turn their cameras off, or they can close their eyes, or whatever. So just think about that in a different way as well. Brilliant.
Yep. Excellent. One final thing in this socially distanced classroom is a little bit of teacher care, and it's thinking about voice strain for two reasons. Firstly, a lot of teachers, actually both in the online classroom and in the socially distanced classroom, have found that they feel like they're using their voice a lot more, whether it's feeling the need to fill the silence or whether it's repeating instructions. A lot of it as well in the socially distanced classroom comes down to wearing a mask and the fact that you're muffled and that you need to speak more clearly.
Can't hear you, T.
Exactly. So it really is important for you to be looking after yourself, looking after one of your most important resources as a teacher, which is your own voice. And so there's a couple of things. At Active Language, we've started giving the voice amplifiers a go. Simon, you said 15 to 18 watts is.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I was talking to a techie person. Anything 12 is sort of the lowest that you want to go for. He was giving me advice as to how to choose them. 12 is the lowest you want to go for. 15 is absolutely fine. 18 is great. 21 is like, hello, caddies, I think. So I don't think it needs to be quite that loud. But yeah, we've introduced them here, and they're some teachers really like them, and we're doing on a real optional basis to trial them and then buy them if people like them, which is working okay. And even for ourselves as teachers, if the school's not going to invest in it, everybody's under difficulties at the moment, but they're not expensive. Now, we can look online at a famous online store, or we can look elsewhere. I'm a big fan of looking elsewhere whenever we can. And they're not expensive. 20, 25 euros will get you something that's okay. And speaking to teachers, not only ELT teachers in our sort of situation, but people in mainstream teaching as well, they think it's the best 20, 30 quid they've ever spent in their lives. Actually, that, it's the thing that worries me most about teachers. That idea about self-care, yeah, it's really important. Do look after yourselves. So that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing teachers use them in a mainstream school even before COVID, and they could just speak normally to a class of 25, 30 students. They didn't need to raise their voice. And I think, for them, when they're teaching 6 hours on the trot, it's a lifesaver, and for us as well now. Even though we have smaller groups, but we're often in physically bigger spaces because of the social distancing norms. And so, you do need to project to make sure Johnny at the back can hear you when you're talking through your mask.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, just to interrupt a second. Of course, that only solves the pronunciation issues one way. If we're thinking about, it's not only about, I don't know if you already mentioned this, can't remember, but it's about clarity in our pronunciation to provide a clear model for students. Of course, when it comes back to us, it's still going to sound a bit weird, but at least we're providing a really clear, so that's another interesting thing.
And I think another way that we can provide this really clear model, thanks again for the handy link, is look for opportunities to record yourself or other teachers before the class. So if you know that you're going to be doing a lesson where you're going to be drilling lots of new language, lots of new phrases, take the opportunity and record that before the lesson. And then the students will be able to see you actually physically moving your mouth when you are drilling. I said before that you can tell a lot just from visualizing. And I think for some sounds that are quite difficult for Spanish speakers in our situation to distinguish, actually being able to physically see the difference can really help them in their own pronunciation. I'm thinking of things like the B and the V. So the baby has no teeth, but the vampire does. So things like that, just adding that extra visual aspect really helps.
I'm going to steal that baby vampire thing.
I know, I don't know who I heard it from. And ever since then, it's what I always teach my students, babies and vampires.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. What else have we got on is that the three? You said 333?
They were my three, yeah. So we had minimizing paper, using up energy, and protecting your voice.
Brilliant. Okay, just going back to the chat a little bit. Thank you all for getting so involved in that. I've been trying to have a look through all sorts of resources on there, which I'm not going to go through because I can't quite get there. But a few things that really stood out for me is about someone very much resonating the idea about the singing online, coming back to the idea about muting students and the horrendous noise. I think it was JG talking about the horrendous choir that you get back at the school. and it's horrible for everybody. So actually, yeah, that mute button's a great idea. What else have we got? Something from Alex, which I really liked. I think this was talking about the brain break and the movement break. The good old fashioned, she put it, stand up if you've got this. Rather than change seats if, stand up, sit down, lovely. And that also makes me think actually that those old fashioned, the good old techniques, just a small tweak. It's not about throwing them out, but just with a small tweak, I think we can use them still, and I think that's a really great way of doing it. Yeah, somebody else talked about the importance of the school relationship with families, and actually it's not just about the student and the teacher. There's also a really important set of relationships around the school and communication between the school and the students and their families. Just to get into some details, to show care, to talk about how to make the classes better. Michaela talked about using the one-to-one messaging things as well, where we can just send individual messages to students. Often on the chat, it's a group chat, but let's not forget, certainly on Zoom, which we use a lot, you can send individual messages to people. I think you can on others as well. Blackboard Collaborate, I'm pretty sure you can. Microsoft Teams, I think you can as well. So that's, I think, it's another avenue to include. Someone else said, "Oh, I'd forgotten about that." And I think one of the things around sessions, I think it was around the mute button, around sessions and webinars like this, is that some of the things, yeah, we heard before, and then we've forgotten about. And for me, whether it's about a physical conference or whether it's about online, the idea of remembering best practice and remembering ideas and remembering things to do is great. Kim mentioned Zoom and the new privacy settings, which I think is really interesting. There's been some chat around that. I've struggled to keep up with this a little bit, apologies, but do read back in the chat. It seems to be that with the new privacy settings, you have to ask them to unmute themselves rather than us being able to control things. I believe that other people were saying in the chat that you can go back, you need to go into advanced settings and things like that. Yeah, Zoom is simple. All these platforms are relatively simple, but you know, when you get into them and you really want to think about how to use them as you want to, then yeah, getting into those advanced settings feels really important. Yes, there's something really interesting about getting student buy-in. I think Alex mentioned this. Getting student buy-in on certain things. So the frustration levels of students who might be in the room, this was in relation to those hybrid classes. The frustration for students who are in the room while the teacher's faffing about or trying to solve a tech issue that a student has. Yeah, I think it's one of the good things maybe about proper hybrid, if you like, that 50% in, 50% at home, and the switching between the two, is that everybody knows what it feels like to be in both places. So maybe it's worth having those conversations as a class and talking about the frustrations and sharing those things. Yes, and thinking about tasks that people can be doing at the same time, perhaps. Yeah, lots to think about, for sure, for sure.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks for keeping an eye on the chat. I launched into my thing and then realized I didn't actually have Facebook on my phone, not the app. And so I was trying to download it at the same time to you guys. So Simon did a great job on the chat and keeping an eye on it, and we will go through it as well and follow up, whether it's adding links to the things we've mentioned or trying to respond to individual queries that have come up. So as we mentioned at the start, this is the first in a new series of webinars called TEFL in the time of COVID. And the rest of the webinars in the series will actually be exclusively available to members who join us in the TEFL Development Hub. You might have noticed that Simon today is the TEFL Development Hub. And so we'd like to take this opportunity now to tell you a little bit more about it. So Simon, tell us, what is the TEFL Development Hub?
Great, thanks, T. Yes, essentially the TEFL Development Hub is a space for English language teachers, English language teaching professionals to connect, share and develop in these times of COVID and beyond as well. Of course, it's about providing a space for ongoing, continuous professional development, professional support, and having a place to go to share these things, to ask questions, to share ideas, to share webinars, whatever it may be, articles that people have read and would like to share and think will be helpful for people. A place where we can ask questions and get some answers and get support. It echoes what I was saying right at the top about feeling connected is one of the most powerful things I think that we can do, and we can help each other. And this is not just during the time of COVID thing. We're very much hoping that this community grows, is valuable for people and helps people, not only in terms of the teaching in the classroom, but also in terms of their bigger professional development goals, whether they may be in the classroom or whether they may be around materials writing, around getting into teacher training, thinking about language school management, for example, how to move into those roles, what sort of person could it be, and even, you know, in terms of business support. Lots of people are setting up their own businesses. It's interesting as well to think about that for a second and to think, actually doing some classes online, yeah, you're running your own business at that point, and people need some help, some guidance, some ideas, whether it's an online venture or whether it's bricks and mortar school, whatever it may be. There'll be support for us to help us develop our teaching and develop our careers and ourselves as well. We'll keep up to date with things that are going on around the profession, and welcome lots of input. Really, the idea is that it is a community, and the community will help each other in whatever setting we are. You know, we touched today a little bit on, and we've really just scratched the surface, it feels like, in terms of hybrid teaching behind a mask in the socially distanced classroom, and did I mention hybrid? Possibly.
Anything online.
And again, there's so much to do here. There's so much work to be done, and this is a place where we hope that work can happen. Yes, and joining the membership hub, what that will give you is access to the community, help, support, ideas, inspiration from the community, where there's teachers, fellow teachers, teacher trainers, there's writers, there's school managers, there's school owners, whole groups of people already involved in the hub. And it'd be great to have more people there. And there's a members only Facebook page where most of that is going to happen. We are exploring other avenues. Some people are anti-Facebook for understandable reasons. It seems like the best to go for at the moment, but there will be other avenues explored. So yes, you'll get that support from the community, keep up to date, and you'll get access to future webinars of this type. Webinars like this series, TEFL in the time of COVID. There'll be some live chat events and all sorts of other bits and bobs floating around. Oh, and you'll also, and it's worth actually at this point doffing cap to T, who in the first lockdown time was was putting out all sorts of really great webinars around Zoom, the basics, using Zoom, etc., which were hugely popular. All those will be exclusively available through the hub as well. What else? Oh, yeah, this is my bit to talk a little bit. You can save money. I feel like an advert here, which is a bit weird. You can save money. Also through the hub, you'll get exclusive discounts to any active language teacher training courses, whether that be the short courses that we run, the Trinity TEFL courses that we run, etc., etc. And as it says on the website as well, you can earn money. Introducing people to active language teacher training, and you'll get a very straightforward 10% of any course fees that they pay as a thank you. Hub membership not included, I should add. And of course, this is fabulous. We all need to make a living during these times, and the special offer that I alluded to earlier is for you guys who are here today. Is a special launch offer of just €3 a month to join the hub. T will take you through the details in a minute. Oh, you can join as an individual member, which is €3, or as a school where you can pay €20 a month, and I think we said up to 10 teachers can join, or 10 people can join the hub for that. So yeah, please be in touch around that, and T will tell you now how to join.
Yep, so as Simon mentioned, you can find all the details about the TEFL Development Hub on our website. If you go to activelanguage.net, and at the top of the page, you'll see a little the TEFL Development Hub link. It's got all the information about what it is, who it's for, what you get when you join. And then at the bottom of the page, there's the option to join either as an individual or as an institution. So you just click there, enter your details. It's done through PayPal and set up to do a recurring monthly payment. If you could add, there's like an optional notes. If you could add there your Facebook name, just so that then we can add you as quickly as possible to the members only group. Yep.
The only thing for me to add to that is that you know, I'm a big fan of keeping things as reasonably priced as possible, and so I guarantee you that the price that you join at is the price that you'll pay moving forward. So, for example, when it's hugely popular and the prices go up, then you will always pay just €3 a month. Okay, so hopefully this will be the start of something really interesting, really good for everybody. And the aim, of course, is to support teachers, to help us enjoy our classes more, to help our students as much as possible. And I've been TEFLing for over 20 years. It's great to see some people here. A little shout out to Tim Groombridge, who was my teacher trainer back in Costa Rica. Great to see you here, Tim. And over this time, it's given me so much joy, so much pleasure, that I think it's about sharing some of this with people. And it feels like a continual way of doing it. An online space, an online community is something that's necessary for our profession. And our aim is to do it as well as we possibly can. We totally welcome your participation. Thank you for everybody who's joined us in the chat today and joined us here. And we really welcome your feedback as well, ideas, thoughts, comments about how to improve things or things to share or whatever. All really helpful. And of course, please do share it with your friends and colleagues. And I think that's it from us at this point. Yeah, we said it would be about an hour, and it's crikey, it's almost exactly an hour. Yeah, crikey, amazing. So thank you all for joining us. My massive thanks to T, without whom this would be absolutely impossible. And look forward to seeing you really soon at the TEFL Development Hub.
Cool. Hope you can join us. See you soon.